Chapter 3: The Bureau for Arranging Meetings with God. Israel's War of Independence officially ended with armistice agreements in 1949. The unofficial fighting never stopped. Throughout the early 1950s, the country was constantly infiltrated by Arabs from parts of Palestine that had remained in Arab hands after the war, namely the Gaza Strip in the south, which was administered by Egypt, and the West Bank in the east, which Jordan had annexed. The IDF estimated that in 1952 about 16,000 infiltrations occurred, 11,000 from Jordan and the rest from Egypt. Some of those infiltrators were refugees who had fled during the War of Independence, either voluntarily or involuntarily, and were trying to return to their villages and salvage what was left of their property. But many others were militants whose objective was to kill Jews and spread terror. They called themselves Fedayeen, those who self-sacrifice. The Egyptians, despite having signed an armistice, quickly realized that the Fedayeen could fight a proxy war on their behalf. With proper training and supervision, those Palestinian militants could wreak substantial havoc on Israel while giving Egypt the cover of plausible deniability. A young captain in Egyptian military intelligence, Mustafa Hafez, was put in charge of organizing the Fedayeen. Beginning in mid-1953, Hafez, along with Salam Mustafa, the Egyptian military attaché in Jordan's capital, Amman, with 2 M's, started recruiting and training guerrilla squads to be dispatched to Israel's south. For years, those squads, 600 Fedayeen in total, sneaked across the border from Gaza and laid to waste anything they could. They blew up water pipes, set fire to fields, bombed train tracks, mined roads. They murdered farmers in their fields and yeshiva students at study. Although some 1,000 civilians between 1951 and 1955, altogether, some 1,000 civilians between 1951 and 1955 read poorly. They spread panic and fear to the point that Israelis refrained from driving at night on main roads in the south. The proxy squads were considered a huge success. The Israelis couldn't hold Egypt or Jordan directly responsible. They would respond instead by recruiting their own proxies, turning Arabs into informers, collecting intelligence on Fedayeen targets, and then assassinating them. Those tasks were assigned, for the most part, to an IDF intelligence team known as Unit 504. Some of the men of the 504, had been raised in Arab neighborhoods of Palestine, and thus were immediately familiar with the language and customs of the locals. Unit 504 was under the command of Rehavia Vardi, Polish-born. Rehavia Vardi. Polish-born, Vardi had served as a senior Haganah intelligence officer prior to the establishment of the state, and he was known for his sharp wit and blunt statements. Every Arab, he said, can be recruited on the basis of one of the 3 P's: praise, payment, or pussy. Whether through those 3 P's, you know what, you can do that with any fucking leftist these days too. Whether through those 3 P's or other means, Vardi and his men recruited 400 or 500 agents who passed on invaluable information on the period between 1948 and 1956. Those recruits in turn provided 504 with information on a number of senior Fedayeen dispatchers. Several were identified, located, and targeted. In 10 to 15 of those cases, the Israelis persuaded the Arab agents to place a bomb near the target. That's when they would call Unit 188. That was when they required the service of Nathan Rotberg. It was all very secret, Rotberg said. We were not allowed to mention the names of units. We were not allowed to tell anyone where we were going or where we were serving, or, it goes without saying, what we were doing. Rotberg, a thick-necked and good-natured kibbutznik, with a bushy mustache, was one of a small group, only a few hundred men, who took part in forming the original triumvirate of Amman, Shin Bet, and Mossad. In 1951, when Rotberg was assigned to a Marine commando unit called Shayetet 13 or Flotilla 13, Israeli intelligence set up a secret facility north of Tel Aviv to teach special demolitions and manufacture sophisticated bombs. Rotberg, Flotilla 13's explosives officer, was appointed to run it. Rotberg had a large vat installed in which he had mixed TNT and pentyrylthritol, tetranitrate. I never read the cookbook, so these are all new things to me. And other chemicals into deadly concoctions. But though his mixtures were designed to kill people, he claimed that he did not act with hatred in his heart. You need to know how to forgive, he said. You need to know how to forgive the enemy. However, we have no authority to forgive people like bin Laden. That only God can do. Our job is to arrange a meeting between them. In my lab, I opened a matchmaker's office, a bureau that arranged such meetings. I orchestrated more than 30 such meetings. When Rahavia, Vardy, and his men had identified a target, they would go to Rotberg for a bomb. At first, we worked with double-bottomed wicker baskets, Rotberg said. I would cushion the bottom part of the basket with impermeable paper and pour the concoction in form of the bat. In from the vat. Just watched Batman. Read poorly. Then we'd put on a cover, and above that, fill it with fruits and vegetables. For the triggering mechanism, we used pencils into which we inserted ampules filled with acid that ate away at the cover until it reached the detonator, activated it, and set off the charge. The problem with the acid was that weather conditions affected the time it took to eat away the cover, producing non-uniform timing. A bomb in the Gaza Strip would go off at a different time than the one in the West Bank, where it is generally colder. We then switched to clocks, which are much more accurate. But Rotberg's bombs were hardly enough to solve the Fedayeen problem. According to several sources, explosives killed only 7 targets between mid-1951 and mid-1953. While in the process, killing 6 civilians. The attacks continued, unabated, terrorizing Israeli civilians, humiliating the Israeli Defense Forces. Vardy and his men, talented as they were at recruiting agents, managed to glean only sparse information about the identities of the Fedayeen handlers, and even when the unit did ferret out specific targets, the IDF was unable to find or kill them. We had our limitations, said Yigal Simon, a Unit 504 veteran and later on its commander. We didn't always have intelligence. We couldn't send our agents everywhere, and they didn't appreciate us enough in the IDF. It was important to the High Command to show the IDF, Jewish hands, could execute these actions. Regular IDF units did try several times to penetrate the Gaza Strip, Sinai, and Jordan to carry out retaliation attacks, but they repeatedly failed. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion accordingly decided to develop whatever capability the IDF lacked. At a secret meeting in June 11, 1953, the Israeli cabinet approved his recommendation that it authorized the Minister of Defense, Ben-Gurion himself, to approve acts of reprisal against the attacks on murders committed by those coming from beyond the Israeli-Jordan armistice lines. Ben-Gurion used the authority vested in him to act a short time afterwards. 2 guards at Even Sapir, a settlement near Jerusalem, were murdered on May 25th, and he ordered that the ad hoc secret detail be set up in order to do away with a Palestinian arch-terrorist by the name of Mustafa Samwali. who had been behind the slaying of the guards. Now, Ben-Gurion just needed the right man to lead it.